Yo, what up? Cubic here, back with some more Vital tutorials. What are we learning today? In case you're blind and you didn't read the title, this is what. Oh, super proud of that one. But yeah, we're making that in Vital.
Hello, please excuse the interruption.
Alright, so a bunch of you guys have DM'd me over the past month being like, loved your Vulture tutorials, can you please make a Marauda tutorial? Now, I don't really make TEAROUT, it's not my area of expertise, so, I thought this was going to be extremely hard for me to figure out, but with the odds stacked against me, I was able to figure out how to do MARAUDA-STYLE sustained notes. I'm pretty goddamn proud of this remake. I feel like I got pretty damn close to the original sound. Obviously, there's probably another layer or two that MARAUDA added, or just some background elements that help hype up the sound, along with just the way he processes is probably a bit different than how I did it. But nonetheless, I'm giving you the tools to shoot close. Now, before we get started, if you are lazy or ADHD as fuck like me and you don't have the patience to sit through a tutorial that is teaching you how to build this sound from the ground up and equipping you with some extra tips and tricks along the way, and you would rather just download the preset, break it down yourself later on, feel free to do so. I do have a link in the description, but real quick, before you go grab that, I would appreciate it if you'd at least give the video a like and subscribe if you want more content like this. It would be very helpful, and come on, I'm giving you a free fire as fuck preset, but nonetheless, download link in the description if you would rather just skip through this video and just go straight to the preset. That being said, here is the sound without any of the Ableton processing I added, which, by the way, I will be going over the processing and the sub, because the sub is a big part of this fat ass sub. But yeah, here's without any of the processing, and it's surprisingly pretty chunky without any processing. I mean, like, listen to that. That's still, like, Vital's really coming through. But yeah, with that being said, let's start things out in Vital and get into how I created this MARAUDA-STYLE sustained bass. Alright, so we are back in Vital with the initialize preset. Now, we're going to start things off with a triangle wave. So you're going to go to basic shapes, and we're going to scroll on through to the triangle wave. Now, before we get too into this, I do want to say that a big part of this sound is the pitch bend. I really recommend, if you haven't already, mess with pitch bending your sounds, your basses. It can really alter the energy and the impact of your basses. As such, in the MARAUDA-STYLE sustained basses, without the pitch bend, it's just not quite the same. So we're going to start things off by putting the triangle wave up to 48 semitones. We're going to bring the unison voices to around 4, the detune to 24%. I don't know why I did that. 20% is probably fine. Basically giving us some wide detuned noise, as you will come to find out in a second when we add the second oscillator, which is also going to be 48 semitones above. We're going to find the low high fold. It's in the factory section. And we're going to FM A from oscillator, or I guess this isn't serum. We're going to FM oscillator 1 from oscillator 2. We're also going to turn the level of both of these oscillators up. So yeah, make sure your FM from oscillator 2 is around this area, the 12% range. Now, I know this doesn't sound anything like the sound we're going through yet, but trust me, we're getting there. So next, you're going to put the formant on oscillator 2. And so we're kind of flattening out the high-pitched harmonics, making it more noisy, but it's still maintaining a nice tone. We're going to want to bring the phase to 32. And we're going to bring the phase randomization down to 18%. We don't want too many different variation in the timbre and the FM. We're also, while we're at it, going to bring the phase randomization of oscillator 1 down to 5%, and we're going to bring the phase to 121. And that's just, I guess, the sweet spot that I found when I was making the original preset. And again, you don't want too much variation going on with the sustains. I mean, it's really up to you, but at least in this case, I wanted almost every hit to sound like the Marauda hit. Then we're going to add a third oscillator to the mix. Now, these two oscillators are obviously extremely high. We need to level that out with a much lower oscillator. And we're going to put on basic shapes again. And we're going to bring it to the saw wave. Now for this one, we're going to bring the phase to 315. Now this phase stuff isn't the most important thing when making presets, but I have found, especially with Vital for some reason, maybe it's just a technique that I've only discovered through using Vital, and it probably applies to all synthesizers out there. But I have noticed that messing with the phase and the phase randomization, you can really have even more customization of how your sound sounds, and you can find really interesting like sweet spots within the phase, as well as automating the phase in different ways. I've seen that in certain presets, and it's interesting effects depending on what you have going on in your oscillators. Next, we're going to get the FM from oscillator 1 going on oscillator 3. Now, obviously, if you can tell, FM is kind of the key to wild sustains. The more FM, the better. I mean, actually not in all cases, but FM, you can really get some cool effects going with sustains. And so this is where we're at right now. Now that's a cool sustain on its own, but we're going for Marauda style. So we're going to keep it going by adding a noise oscillator, and we're going to put it on Grinder, not the gay dating app. We're not going to mess with the level, but we're going to bring it up to 48 semitones. And remember, shift clicking is how you just bring it up by octaves really quickly. Then we're going to put key tracking on. That's going to add that nice noisy kind of clippy feeling high end that Marauda has on a lot of his sounds. And yeah, that's it for the oscillators. Next, we're going to turn on a filter, and we're going to have it only cover the first oscillator. We're going to bring things down to the comb filter, to the band spread comb. We're going to turn the cutoff down to around 7 semitones if you have yours set to semitones. Just that general area. We're going to bring the mix just to halfway because we're kind of just messing with the tonality of the sound. We're not going to completely just destroy it with the comb filter. We're going to bring the key tracking down to the negative side. We're going to bring the resonance down a bit, and yeah, that looks about right. So all this is doing is just highlighting a few frequencies in the mid-range, kind of giving us some resonances, just pop it up. It's very subtle, but it's the subtle things when you're sound designing that all stack on top of each other into the final product. So another subtle thing we're going to do is we're going to make a kind of halfway ramp down in LFO1, and we're going to link that to the semitones of oscillator 1. We're going to bring it to around -2. We're going to bring the frequency up to about 16.1 because obviously at the 1/2 rate, it's a bit much. I mean, if that's what you're going for, go for it. But at least with Marauda, just a longer pitch down felt right. And then we're also going to drag that to the formant on oscillator 2. And we're going to put that to around 0.110. Also, I forgot, we're going to bring the level of oscillator 3 all the way up. We want shit clip in, boy. Next. All right, so this is where stuff starts. Now, it's basically time to distort the shit out of it, make it a bit noisy. You'll see as we go along. So yeah, we're going to move on to the effects now. So we're going to start things off with a good old distortion, like I said, but we're going to get a little fancy with it. We're going to put on a bit crush, and we're going to use that bit crush to our goddamn advantage by putting it up to about 8.7 decibels. Just adding more noise As you can tell, noise and distortion is a big chunk of Marauda's just fat, noisy, hitting in your face tear out. When you pair it with a fat sub, it just really just pushes it. So next we're going to throw on a filter, cut out some of the super high frequencies. We're going to throw it on the ladder filter, 12 decibel though. We're going to throw the drive up to around 5.2 decibels, and then we're going to bring the cutoff all the way, almost touching the end, not quite though. Then we're going to bring the resonance down to 32, around that. Obviously none of these values need to be exact. I'm just going off of the original preset I made. So if you can hear, that's sounding a bit closer now. And so yeah, the feel of the ladder filter just kind of eliminates some of that high-end ring that wasn't so pleasant, and weirdly enough takes out a bit of the low end, or at least the lower mids. And so it makes it feel a little thinner overall, but it's what we want in this situation. Next, we're throwing on the chorus. We're going to bring the depth down. We're going to bring the delay to around 6. Now, obviously, we're not going to keep the mix up like this, but when it comes to effects like this, I like to keep the mix up so I can hear the exaggerated effect, and then you can just dial it back to where it sounds actually nice and kind of complements your sound rather than taking away from the sound. So next we're going to bring the cutoff to around 46, just roll off the highs. We're going to bring the feedback to around 27%, doesn't have to be exact. So that's just kind of spreading things out, giving it a little bit of space, but we're obviously going to pull the mix back because that's too much. It's very subtle, but like I said, it's the subtle things, especially when you add a compressor into the mix, which is what we're doing right now. We got it on multi-band mode. We're going to start off by shaping our sound with the thresholds and the ratios of the individual bands. Bring that up to around there. Keep this as is, but we're gonna change the ratio a bit. This one's kind of good where it is. Bring that down a little bit. Change the ratio of that one, and then we're gonna just push down the lows because we know that we're gonna need a fat sub going under the sustain, so no point in having a bunch of low end that's gonna clash. There we go, perfect. Then we're gonna just mess with the band levels over here. We're going to bring the low up a bit. I don't know why I did that honestly, because that's a little bit counterproductive, but I guess I still wanted to include the lower mid harmonics in there. I don't know. We can keep this one as is, and then we just bring this one, the high end, up a tiny bit. Then finally, we're gonna mess with the release. We're gonna open up the release a bit. It's a sustain. We want those little fragments trailing off at the end. Just, it kind of adds to that whole energy of how huge it is. Kind of brings out the chorus space a little bit. And then we're gonna bring the attack up because we want that impact to be huge. All right, so we're getting a nice ring there. I'm loving it. Next, we're gonna add a delay. We're gonna keep everything pretty much as is. We're just gonna bring the feedback down, and we're gonna bring the mix down. Now, I don't quite know why I did this. Maybe I heard delay in the original, but either way, it just contributes more to that huge feeling. It adds a tail. I don't think the delay is necessary. I think I wanted a slight bit of a metallic feeling. Just adds a tiny bit more space to your sound. And then we're gonna cap things off with an EQ. Now the EQ is where we truly sculpt the final product. Obviously, with the way it sounds right now, there's some slightly unlikable parts about this sound. It's not the cleanest, it's a bit muddy. So what we're gonna do is click this middle dip icon thing. I don't know what this is officially called, but we're gonna click that and we're gonna bring it right around here. Just clean up this little area, take away some mud. We're gonna keep the resonance right around here. We're gonna turn the gain up. Now, I don't know why I have the gain turned up, so you actually don't really need to do anything with the gain. But you know, sometimes you're sound designing and you just make decisions in the moment and it sounds good after the fact, and maybe those decisions had no influence on the actual sound, but who knows. Next, we're going to bring this one up here. Just gonna keep pushing those highs to the sky. We're gonna bring the resonance up, and then finally we're going to bring this shelf over here up here. So we're bringing everything up around it, but we're leaving a little dip right here. I don't know why I did that, but you know, that's where this is basically the completed preset. Other than one final thing, you want to go to the advanced tab, bring the unison blend down, basically allowing that middle unison voice to come through. Makes it a bit cleaner, as you can hear. Up here, up there, it's just more present. You don't have as much mud in the sides. So now it's time to go into the extra processing I did in Ableton. If you have Ableton, it should be super easy for you to just follow along. But if you do not have Ableton, I will try to explain this in a way that you should be able to apply it in whatever DAW you're working in. All of the effects I use, except maybe one, are things that should be readily available in some form or another in your stock plugins in your DAW. The only thing that's not is the disperser from Kilohertz. If you don't have that though, it's not a big deal. It doesn't make the hugest impact on the sound. So first off, actually, before we even get into the processing, this is what I did for the actual sound. In case you want to like remix this song or something, it's the note of F sharp. I put a pitch bend. Basically, it actually starts above F sharp and then goes down, and then I just curve it off at the very end. Kind of gives it this dramatic like wow, which I noticed Marauda did himself. But yeah, this is the pitch bend. I believe the bend in Vital is on 12. Yeah. So that's the pitch bend range. So yeah, moving forward, I added a disperser. It's the smallest amount of girth that has been added, but it does make some difference. I mainly just did it though because I like throwing disperser on shit. It's not essential. Next, we've got some chorus. I'm not going to go through all the specific settings on all of these. It's mostly like what I was explaining earlier. You turn the wet all the way up. You just change all the different controls till it sounds cool, or like you can hear like some potential of like, oh, if I turn the mix down, it'll add this to the sound. And so then once you get all your settings the way you'd like them, you turn the dry wet down. And so yeah, the chorus is very subtle and it just adds some more width and some more room. Next, we've got a hybrid reverb because this is Ableton Live 11. It's basically the same as convolution reverb, or like any reverb will do. These are the settings I did. I also EQ'd it a little bit apparently, or maybe this was just a preset in Ableton. But actually, this is huge in the sound. I didn't even realize how huge it was until I just played it. It kind of adds some sort of like effect to it, of like some sort of riser almost. So I think I just got very lucky there. If you have a reverb that does, I don't even really understand what part of this is doing that. Again, the best way you could take away from that, if you don't have Ableton 11 at the moment, just layer some effects, layer some risers. Like it sounds like it's almost frequency shifting it. Next, we've got an amp in Ableton. This is basically a type of distortion, but it's more modeled after an amp. Like if you put an acoustic guitar into a guitar amp and make it sound like a rad, distorted electric guitar, it's the same sort of thing. So if you have any sort of amp plugin in your DAW, that'll work. If not, I'm sure you can find a distortion plugin to give a similar feel. It's a very subtle feel. Super subtle, it's almost unnoticeable, but it's just giving a tiny bit more grit to the sound. Then obviously from making the Vital preset, we added a lot of high end, so I'm kind of just completely shitting on all that high end we made, saving our ears a bit, but we are bringing it back with an OTT, don't worry. It's just sometimes with processing sound, sometimes it's a lot of like giving an obnoxious amount of frequencies and harmonics and then kind of sculpting out what you want. And then sometimes you need to take away a bunch and then pull some more out. It's this weird give and take game. And I can't even explain too much about that mentality because a lot of it's just learned through experience. And that's something that just comes along with doing a bunch of sound design sessions, watching other producers, how they process things. But next, you have the option to add, this is basically in Ableton. If you're not from Ableton, this is something called auto pan. It's meant to allow you to automatically pan your sound around, but something that a lot of people who use Ableton use it for is as an LFO tool, essentially, or like a volume shaper. Basically, any sort of volume shaper or LFO tool you have can do the same thing. It's on 124 the rate, and then it's just a shape of the sine wave, and the amount, the dry wet essentially is at 80%. And yeah, it sounds really good, especially when paired with the sub, except you don't want to do the same volume automation to the sub because basically those moments where the sound dips out, it lets the sub come through and it gives it this kind of, I don't know, it just works. I tried it out. Putting this on the sub does not sound nearly as heavy. So next, obviously we have a sub, so we want to cut out the lows, and I did another dip to a very harsh area of the highs. This kind of area in most sustains and just harsh sounds in general. This is an area of the frequency range where human ears are very sensitive. I think it has to do with like our predisposition to like babies crying or something. It has to do more with the Fletcher-Munson curve, but I'm not super technical and scientific like that. I just dipped that general area. Oh wait, let me turn this off. But yeah, it takes out a lot of mud, really giving the sub a lot of room to breathe there because most of the sub is taking place in this area of the frequency range. There's obviously some in this area, as you'll see when I go through the sub, but basically just cleaning out, making room for other frequencies. That's how you give yourself a clean mix. A lot of mixing is just balancing the frequency range, giving things room, taking away excess fat from other elements that don't need it in the big picture. Like, you know, when I take it away, when it's soloed, it feels like I'm really taking away a lot of the meat of the sound, and it feels a lot less impact. But that's why it's important to kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, because together it sounds great, and with everything, all the elements all filling in their ranges, that's when stuff really pays off. And then also there's a saturator using an EQ. Whenever I take out a lot of the frequencies, I do like to put a saturator at the end just to kind of warm up the rest of the frequencies that are left, and it adds more harmonics to those frequencies. Kind of gives us back a little bit of that girth that we took, but it's more in the range that we have kind of specified through the EQ that we would like to highlight. And then moving on to the sub. This is a very fat boy, so this part will be a little hard to kind of translate to your DAW because it is a preset within Ableton. It's called Basic Subsine. It's a new Ableton 11 preset, I believe. I mean, definitely check if you have it. I don't know for sure, but the hip hop sub should work just as well. But basically, yeah, this is the operator patch, and then it's cutting off the high end because in most contexts and situations, this is all you need for your sub range. But this is TEAROUT, and I did want a kind of higher end. You'll see. But basically then it's got some multiband dynamics and a saturator. This is again a preset, so I didn't create all that. I just messed with the macros, so I can't really go into too much depth in terms of that. But these are the things I added. These three, go ahead and turn them on. Start with the add beef. Basically, erosion is a noise generator. You can do sine modulation or just straight up white noise. But yeah, so I have it on the wide noise because I'm only applying it to the top end. So, you know, if your sub has some width, it's fine. If it's kind of above the, like, I'd say 300 to 400 range, you're probably good. But basically, it's just adding some noise. making it a little bit brighter, and it kind of gives it the illusion that it's more saturated than it is. It helps the sub come through a little bit more on things like a phone speaker. But the real key is to saturate and usually put an OTT or an amp or some sort of distortion after the noise generator, and that'll really like bring things out. But basically, this saturator that I added kind of calms down the sub a little bit, because it was a bit too top heavy and probably taking up too much space from the Marauda sustain. And then we're just gonna add an EQ, boosting the lows. Whenever I boost something, I try to take something away in a different area, kind of maintain the balance. Putting a dip in around this range on your subs somehow makes it impact more. I don't completely understand how it works that way, but it works that way. It's just like this subtle like taking away of mud, I guess, that somehow allows it to breathe more. I don't know. It's one of those things that, like I said, subtle things like that all combine for the big picture. But yeah, that is the sub. Same pitch bend together. Wall of noise with thick boy underneath it. And yeah, that completes our beautiful Marauda drop. Then I do have some drums, but this was lazily put together. I put a ride, and what is this? Oh, that's a tail for the snare with a transient for the snare. And then there's this voice thing, because I noticed basically the only things going on with the drums are kick, snare, and then there's just these energetic rides. I have noticed that with TEAROUT, if you're really trying to add energy to your drop, rides will do the trick. And then also, yeah, there's these offbeat vocals with delay in the original drop. So those also help fill up the drop and just add more energy to the drop. So yeah, guys, that is the end of the how to Marauda sustain bass tutorial. I really hope you guys got something out of that. I know that it isn't the most spot on recreation of the sound, but I do think I got pretty close, and I hope that this kind of took away a little bit of the mystery of TEAROUT sustain basses for you. I know that Marauda has all sorts of different styles. This is the style of sustain bass that I thought I'd shed some light on and do best. And so yeah, if you enjoyed this video, definitely please like the video. It really helps me out. Subscribe as well. You can always unsubscribe, and especially if you want to see more Vital tutorials or music reviews, that's the other thing I do. But yeah, if you think I got anything wrong, if you have any questions about this tutorial, any suggestions for future tutorials you'd like to see from me, definitely comment those down below. And while you're down there, go ahead and check out my Discord server. Got a bunch of like-minded individuals, other producers, music lovers that you can share your music with, get feedback, find cool new samples, ask me any questions, send me your music, just hang out, make friends. It's a great place. But yeah, my name is qbik, and I will see you in the next tutorial and or music review. But yeah, have a great rest of your day and have fun making some fire ass TEAROUT now.